Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Yevamos Daf Nun Vav, Yevamos 56. Today's Daf Yomi we are studying in memory of Chai Chaim ben Aviva Mordechai, Philip Rodkin, and Dr. Philip Rodkin as we prepare for his yard site, which is this coming Shabbos, and also sponsored by Monty Bennett in memory of his grandmother, Mary Sfredo. So today's Daf Yomi will start Chodesh Tov on the top of 56a. And our Mishnah listed various forms of what's called bios gruyos. So bios gruyos is that the bia, i.e. the consummating act of the marriage, of the yibum or of the other forms of marriage, were done in a way that was somehow inferior. Either there was done without intent, under compulsion, shogeg, it was an accidental, onus, it was forced, or it was done with somehow a sexual act that was not the ideal way. Either it was it was done with just the initial beginning of the sexual act, or if it was done what's called bia shelo kedarka, the sexual act in the way that is not the typical way, i.e. through anal intercourse. So the Talmud discusses this. So we had said with respect to Yibum that these ways are ways of consummating the Yibum marriage. So the statement of the Mishnah was on the top of 56a, whether or not the person does the mara, which is just the initial sexual act, or whether the person does the completion of the sexual act, kona, that the act is considered to be consummating for the yibum. So the Gemara says, "My kona." What does that mean? Rav Amar Kano Akol. Rav says that it requires everything, meaning to say, even with this inferior bia, it acquires, it's considered to be like complete bia, and so the woman who was the Yevama is able to now eat the truma of her husband, of the Yavam. But Shmuel says, Shmuel says, no, it's not going to be enough of a yibum to allow her to eat from the truma of the yavam, but what it's going to be is it's those things that are enumerated in the passage, i.e. to inherit the state of his brother, and to release her from yibum. What does that mean? Means to say that if she had co-wives, the co-wives can now marry anybody, or if the person who did the yibum with her died, then she's also able now to do. She's able to marry anybody. She doesn't require any other ritual. Mina nisuin. Now, so the Gemara explains, if the woman had fallen to yibum from a state of nisuin, nisuin is the complete marriage. It wasn't not just the initial betrothal. Then with divrei hakol, then everybody would be in the position that then even Shmuel would say, even though Shmuel says an inferior bia does not acquire everything, Shmuel would say under this position that she could eat from the truma, because she was eating the truma initially. Because she was eating the truma initially, meaning to say she had been able to eat it when she was married to her first husband. She was completely married. They're only arguing about a situation where she falls to yibum from a state of erisin. Erisin is the betrothal only, not the full marriage. Rav Rav's other position, that she could eat it. Rav says that she can eat from the truma even if she falls from a state of erisin, from betrothal, because the Torah said that when it comes to yibum, the accidental bia is going to be considered to have the same validity as if it had been done purposely. We Shmuel Amar, where Shmuel's of the position, Ki Rabbi Rachmana Ukme b'makom Baal. Now Shmuel's of the position that when the Torah says that bia shogeg is like mazid, that was only to take over the same strength as the initial husband. But to make it stronger than the initial husband, well, that's not going to be effective. And Shmuel follows his logic. Shmuel, Kol Baal Machil, Yavam Machil. Kol She'ena Baal Machil, Yavam Eno Machil. Shmuel follows his initial logic because Shmuel's of the position that any case where the husband was officially married, that he's going to enable the wife to eat the truma, and under those circumstances, the yavam, if it's a bia geruos, if it's an inferior bia, then he's going to enable the wife to eat it. In any case where it was not, where the husband was not able to feed the wife the truma, then since it's just a bia gerua, it's just an inferior bia, the yavam is not going to be able to do it. So that's the position of Shmuel. So the Gemara challenges Shmuel's position. Meisvei, we have a brisa. What does the brisa say? If there was a daughter of an Israelite and she was of sound mind, shenis arsal a kohen pikeach, who she herself became betrothed to a kohen who was a pikeach. Well, hisbik konsa. So she herself became betrothed. This daughter of an Israelite who was of sound mind, who became betrothed to a Kohen who was of sound mind. Well, he speak with Kohen, but he wasn't able to fully initiate complete the marriage and do the nisuin before he became deaf mute, i.e., he's no longer of sound mind. Then, under those circumstances, eino chelas, she's not able to eat from the truma, and the reason is because she was not fully married. But if he died, the husband who was now the deaf mute before he fully married her, if he dies, if not, v'nafal ifnei yavam chayresh, and she fell before a yavam who's of chayresh, so that means he's a deaf mute. I.e., so it's with him, it's going to be a bia grua ochelas. Then she's allowed to eat from the truma. Ubezu yafekoch hayavam mikoch habal. But in these cases, we say that the yavam has more position, more authority, more strength than the baal. And this is, so the Gemara says, Bishlam Rav Nicha. This makes sense according to Rav, because Rav says a bia geruya is konan. So therefore, that's why the yavam is able to effectuate her eating the truma. El Shmuel kasha. According to Shmuel, this is difficult because according to Shmuel, it's a bia geruya from the yavam here. Why is he able to allow her to eat the truma by her being married to him? So the Gemara says, according to Shmuel, it's a question. So Amar Shmuel would say, I would amend the text. I would read it like this: that if he wasn't able to marry her before he became a chayresh, then eino chelas b'truma. Then she does not eat from the truma. However, but if she was fully married and then he became a deaf mute, she's able to eat from the truma. But and then at that point, if she falls before a yavam chayresh, which is a bia geruya, but since she was fully married to the previous person, then she could eat from the truma. That's how Shmuel reads it. Umay bezu, and why does it say with this the yavam has more power than the initial person? Diu bal charesh meikar lo chalas, because the baal, if he was a cheresh, meikara, if he was a cheresh when he did the nisuin with her, if he was deaf mute, then she's not able to eat from the truma. The yavam cheresh meikara, but if she was a yavam. If the yavam was a cheresh when he did the nisun with her, she would be able to eat it. So that's how Shmuel explains that. Gemara is an alternative version of the same discussion. The alternative way, that if it's from the state of Erusin, everybody would say under those circumstances, everybody would say under those circumstances, if it's from the state of Erison, that she cannot eat from the truma. Why? Because everybody says since she didn't eat it while her husband was alive, because from an erison you can't eat the truma, and the reason is because we're concerned that she's going to give it to her brothers because she's still living in her father's home, and so therefore you don't eat it from the state of erison. So therefore, if she falls to yibum and has a bia geruya, everybody's going to say she can't eat from the truma because she didn't eat it. She wasn't able to eat it while her husband was alive. Where do they argue? Only in a case of nisuin. Only in a case where she was fully married. Rav Amar Ochalas. Rav says that she can eat from the truma under those circumstances where she falls to the yavam through a bia geruya from a state of nisuin, because she was eating it when she was married to her husband. Shmuel Amar Eino Ochalas. Shmuel says she cannot eat it. Ki Rabbi Rachmana bia shogeg amazing. When the Torah says that the bia shogeg is like the mazid, that's what Dvarim Amurim b'Parasha. Shmuel says no, she still can't eat from it because it's just a bia geruya, and the accidentals like the purposeful. That's only for those things that are listed in the parasha, like inheriting, etc. Like we said, we'll call mule, but not for truma. Well, but Gemara says, is that really the case? But didn't Shmuel say anything that the husband will allow her to eat, the yavam will allow her to eat? No, that's not how we're supposed to read it. No, read that this is what Shmuel says. It has to be a bia that's not geruya. Any bia that would allow the yavam that will allow the husband to allow her to eat the truma through nisuin, through chuppah, meaning to say it was with intent. So too the yavam achaba, the yavam would allow her to eat the truma under those circumstances. We call bia she'ena ba'al machaba, i.e. through one of these bia geruyos. So too the yavam will not be able to feed her the truma. Ena yavam achaba. So the Gemara challenges this idea of Shmuel. Ba'as Yisrael pikachas and it's aris lakohen pikach. Let's say we have a daughter of an Israelite who's of sound mind, who was betrothed to a Kohen who's of sound mind. Well, he speak with Kohen Tzach and his charish, and he was not able to marry her fully marry her until before it became a deaf mute. She cannot eat from the truma. Mace, but let's say she dies at that point. And then she falls before the yavam, who's a cherish. She's allowed to eat from the truma. And this is how the yavam is able to be stronger than the husband. So the Gemara says, Bishlam no Rav mitaretz keditaretz mekar. Rav will give the same explanation that we gave in the previous version of the discussion. Basically, what Rav said above. That Rav said that basically that what we're talking about a situation is that she's able to eat the truma from a bia geruya. That's how Rav indeed learns it. But according to Shmuel, how would Shmuel read it? Shmuel kasha. How would Shmuel possibly read this brayta? So Shmuel's indeed, according to Shmuel, it's kasha, and so according to Shmuel, it is indeed difficult. So the Gemara says, okay, let's go on to the next piece. Tanar Rabbanim, we're going to analyze this situation we're discussing. Ba'as Yisrael pikachas. Let's say you have a daughter of Israelite who's of sound mind. Shenis Arsel Kohen. She became betrothed to the Kohen who's of sound mind. Because Kohen Tzach is Charsha, and he was not able to marry her fully until she became a deaf mute. So now she can't eat the truma because she's married to somebody who only married her after he was a deaf mute. But now is where the case takes a turn. But let's say she had a child from this deaf mute, then so this the child of a Kohen, so Ochelas. Now she can eat the truma on account of the fact that she's married to him. That's based upon a verse. The verse is stating that Yachilu, we read it as a result of the child. It says V'ui bayis heim yochlu, but we read it heim yochlu b'lachmo, but we read it by Yachilu. This is from Vayikra Parak Chaf Beis, and so therefore, as a result of this, she's able to eat the truma. So the Gemara says, as Noah Ben, But now let's say Mesa Ben, let's say that child who allowed her to eat the truma, let's say that child dies. Rabbi Nazan Omer Ochelas, Chachamim Omer Ein Ochelas. Rabbi Nazan says, once a child has died, she can eat from the truma, and the Chachamim say she cannot eat from the truma. So the Gemara says, my time the Rabbi Nasan. What's the reasoning for Rabbi Nasan? So the Gemara explains, Amarabba Hol Shekfar Achla. The Rabbi says the reasoning for Rabbi Nasan is that why does Rabbi Nasan allow her to eat from the truma from her marriage with the deaf mute once the child has died? Because since she was still able to eat it while the child was alive, now even though the child's died, we still say once she ate it, she could continue. So that's Rabbi Nasan's logic. So Abaye says, that doesn't make any sense as Abaye. Bas Yisrael shenisas l'kohen. If a regular non-Kohen Jew is married to the Kohen umis, and then he dies, mislei techol, she should be allowed to eat the truma according to your logic. We know she can't, but according to your logic, she should be allowed to eat it. Shekfar achla, because she ate it while he was alive. So, but rather we say, "Oh, kimin demis pakole kedushasa." Once he dies, pakole kedushasa. Once her husband has died, then she loses the holiness to eat the truma, which she had as a result of her husband. So too here also, now that her son has died, she lost the holiness and she can't eat from the truma. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Yosef turns back to Abaye and says, oh, well, if that's your logic, Kasavar Rabbi Nasan. So Rabbi Yosef says, what's the reason? Rabbi Yosef says to Abaye, you know what the real reason why, even though her son has died, she can eat from the truma? Because Rabbi Nasan's on the position, Rabbi Nasan's on the position that really, technically speaking, even if she's just married to a cheresh, fully married, she could still eat the truma. We don't really need a son, according to Rabbi Nasan. And we don't say, well, we're not going to allow you to eat it as a Nesuya Cheresh, because then you're going to come to eat it as a Kedusha Cheresh. She doesn't really need a son. She could eat it when she was fully married just to a Cheresh. So then why does the Mishnah have to say, or why does the Bryce have to say that it's that only if she had a son can she eat the Truma? So the Gemara said, why does it even bring that in scenario? If according to Rabbi Nasan, she could eat it even when she doesn't have a child. So the Gemara says, Mishum Rabbanan. The only reason is, according to the Rabbanan who say that she can't eat from the Truma, they'll say even though she has a son, she can't eat from the Truma. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Nasan. So if that's the case, Rabbi Nasan should have argued with the Rabbanan also in the Reisha in the first clause, and he should have said it even in the first clause. He should have said that she eats from the truma even without a son. Even before the case of Noah Laben, it should say Rabbi Nasan says she eats from the truma, where he's fully married, where she's married to a deaf mute. So the Gemara says, Shavaku Rabbanan de Messiah Messiah. Yeah, what Rabbi Nasan did was he waited for the Rabbanan to complete all their teachings. And then he argued and he said, no, I say that she can eat even if her son is dead. I say she can eat. If that's the case, it should have listed it as follows. Once the son has died, she does not eat from the truma. Rabbi Nasan Omer Ochalas. Rabbi Nasan says she eats it. So because instead of putting Rabbi Nasan's words prior to the Chachamim, it should have said Rabbi Nasan's words after the Chachamim, because that would say Rabbi Nasan's words would go on everything. And so that would be a better way to read it. But you put Rabbi Nasan, it makes it seem like he's only going on the case of the son. And so therefore, your words are imprecise, says Rabbi Yosef. So Abaye admits, Kasha, the Gemara admits that Abaye would say that's difficulty. That is a difficulty. But difficulty, a Kasha is the least offensive difficulty. So it seems like Abaye would still stick with his approach that Rabbi Nasan's theory cannot be based upon the fact that once her son has died, since she was able to eat it initially, she could still eat it. That can't be the logic. So the Gemara says, we also learned in our mission that if somebody has a relation with any one of the prohibited sexual relations in the manner of a bia gerua, which we discussed, there were three things. There was the lack of intent, or the lack of a complete penetration, or if it was done bia shalokadarka, in an anal sexual manner. So all those things, you're going to be in violation of the prohibitions of the sexual prohibitions. So Amar Rav Sheshes. So Rav Amram said, this matter Rav Sheshes taught us. He taught us a matter. We're on the top of 56b. And he illuminated our eyes. Illuminated the Mishnah in our eyes. From our Mishnah, he brought a proof to his words. And as a result of that, he illuminated the way we read our Mishnah. What did Rav Sheshes say? Rav Sheshes said the following. It's a tragic case, but he says, if there was a Jewish woman who was sexually assaulted, if she was married at the time, she's allowed to return to her husband, but psula kahuna. But she's disqualified to go to a Kohen. She's disqualified to be with the Kohen. We'll see why. It's based upon a verse. Vitana tuna, and our Mishnah taught, and so too, our Mishnah taught, we'll go back to the beginning of our Mishnah had taught as follows. Our Mishnah said, so too, anyone who is engaged with any of the prohibited sexual prohibitions of the Torah or the disqualified ones. So the Gemara wants, so Rav Sheshes says, and Rav Sheshes is saying there's a proof for his teaching from the Mishnah. Again, what's his teaching? That this woman who was assaulted is going to be disqualified to marry a Kohen. And we learned it out from our Mishnah. What's the position of our Mishnah? Because what does it say? My v'chein. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean it doesn't matter if there was intent or not. If it was even forced. And for Katani Pasla, and we say she's disqualified to be with the Kohen, and isn't that exactly what I'm saying? So our Mishnah proves like I'm saying, says Rav Sheshes. Gemara says, no, that's not what it means. Lo, that's not what it means. My v'chein. What does it mean when it says v'chein? Aha'ara. That's not referring to a woman who was assaulted. That's referring to this woman who just had the initiation of a sexual act, not the complete sexual act. Gemara says, ha'ara demand. What are you talking about? The ha'ara, this initiation, with whom? If you want to say that we're going to learn about this for the relatives or who are prohibited, you want to say we learn about these prohibited sexual relationships from Yibam, and from just like from Yibam we learn that ha'ara is considered a sexual act. So too we learn it to Arayos. Just the opposite. Just the opposite. No, just the opposite. We learned out how do we know ha'ara is a sexual act? We learned out Yibam from Arayos, the Iker Ha'ara by Arayos, because the main aspect of ha'ara was written by Arayos. Elamai v'chein. What does it mean when it says v'chein? And so too by v'chein. What does it mean? So too one who has a relationship with the Arayos. So what does that mean? Mai v'chein ashalo kedarka means to say refers to somebody who has a relation shalo kedarka the arayos. So it means to say that somebody who has these shalo kedarka relations with one of the sexual prohibitions, that's also going to be considered a sexual prohibition. And also, it will disqualify her to the Kohen. So the Gemara says, "Other Abba, that's just the opposite. Ikar mishkavei isha ba'arayos ksiv." This you can't learn out arayos from Yibam. The main idea of shalo kedarka, the bia in the shalo kedarka manner, is learned out from the fact that it says mishkavei isha, which means the multiple ways in which you can have, which there can be sexual intercourse with a woman. So what does it mean? Means to say that it's v'chein. What does it mean? And to tell us this idea that Shalom Kedarka is a prohibition, even by a regular prohibition, just a regular prohibition. So that's what we learned from there. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava or Rabba, depending upon how you read it. So it says Rava or Rabba, Eishes Kohen Shenensa, Baal Lokala Mishum Zona. Let's say there's a wife of a Kohen who was sexually assaulted, and this is a tragic. Eishes Kohen Shenensa, Baal Lokala. If the husband will remain with her, even her husband was a Kohen, he's supposed to divorce her if she was sexually assaulted. And if he remained with her, he's in violation of a prohibition that she is called a zona. The Gemara says that's a technical term, usually translated as harlot, which is actually not a harlot, but that's a technical term that's applied to her. So the Gemara says Mishum zona and Mishum tuma. Well, you mean to say there's another prohibition that the Torah says. The Torah says nitma'ah. Why doesn't it say that she's in violation of the prohibition of nitma'ah by being with her? So Gemara says, Mishum zona and Mishum tumalo, ema af Mishum zona. No, so she's going to be in both prohibitions, the zona in addition to the nitma'ah. So Masev Rebbe Zera challenges Rava or Rava. It says about a regular woman, not the daughter of a Kohen, who is there's about a sota. It says if she is not forced, she's prohibited to be with her husband. Which implies implies that if she is forced, she's permitted. There's another woman who, even though she's forced, she's prohibited to be with her husband. That's the wife of the Kohen. And from here, we see from this point that it's not a negative commandment to remain with your Kohen, but it's a violation of a positive commandment, which is called a lav. So it's not a zona. So Amar Rabba, I call you the call zona. No, everybody was in the category of zona. There was a general prohibition. But when the Torah says specifically that the wife of a regular Jew, if she was assaulted, it says about her in the sota, he wanted fasa surah, and she was not assaulted, and so therefore she's prohibited. That means to say that if she was assaulted, she'd be permitted. And because the Eishes Kohen, we see from here that the wife of the Kohen is going to remain prohibited. And therefore is going to get the lashes from the prohibition of the zona. The Ikadami alternatively, Amarava, Eishes Kohen Shenensa, Ba'ala Lokal Amishim Tumah. Alternatively, it says if a wife of a Kohen is assaulted, she's going to get lashes because of Tumah. Marias Mishum Tumah and Mishum Zona, only from Tumah and not from Zona. So we see from here, Alma Ba'ones, Lo Karina Be'zona. We see if she was assaulted, we don't call her a Zona. So Masav Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Zera challenged that. He wanted Tfasa Surah, which implies on Tfasa Muteris, that if she was assaulted, she's permitted. Why isn't it a positive commandment? Gemara explains, no, Amarava, everybody was included within the prohibition of Asher Hutma'ah. But when a Torah specifies the wife of a regular Jew is only prohibited if she did it willingly, but if she did it not willingly, she is permitted, but if she did it willingly, she's prohibited. That means by a regular Jew, if she did it, if she was assaulted, she's permitted. Called the Eishes Kohen. So we see that the wife of the Kohen, she remains in her prohibition of tum'ah. That's what it says. So therefore, according to this Ikadam, according to this alternative approach, the wife of a Kohen who was assaulted, she's not going to be prohibited because of zona, but because of tum'ah. But she still does remain prohibited, obviously. Okay, we'll stop here, and we learned the memory of Chaim ben Aviv of Leah, and